Hey, good morning, guys. This is going to be another method of solving quadratic equations. It's called completing the square, okay? And hopefully this stuff's starting to make sense to you. We've been studying linear equations for a long time. We're now getting on to quadratics. We started our beginning to develop some of the skills required to solve quadratics before home instruction. And now we're really starting to get into how do we solve these equations where the highest exponent is 2. And we have a couple methods now. We have factoring, we have taking the square root method, but those are limited, right? So as we take a look at this quadratic equation, if we did try to factor this, you might go, hey, Mr. Schwartz, this looks like a type 1 trinomial. And it is. It's a type 1 because the leading coefficient is 1. It's a trinomial, 3 terms. However, when you go to try to find factors of 4 that add up to be 6, you get stuck. There are none. They don't exist. So what we want to do is try another method. And maybe you say, hey, well, how about the one that we just learned, taking the square root of both sides? Well, we said that only works when you only have a square term. And here you could see we have x as well, so we can't take the square root of both sides. And without these methods that we're about to learn, you would get stuck. Okay, so what we recognize here is that none of those methods work, so we need an alternative method. So we're going to talk about completing the square. It's one of the methods that would work. And we'll see here we can come to a solution and find our solutions. What I'm going to do as we do that is I'm going to keep a list of the steps here, okay, as we work our way through. The first step, as you notice, if you remember, this is in the format of ax squared plus bx plus c. And that equals 0, obviously. So I'm going to be referring to our a as 1, our b as 6, and our c as 4 often. And the first step that you want to do if you're going to complete the square, you notice it's not factorable and you can't use the square root method, is you want to move c to the other side. Okay, so coming back here, this positive 4 is our c value, so I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. And I've got x squared plus 6x. And I'm actually going to leave a space here equals negative 4 on purpose, okay? So that's the first thing we want to do is we want to move the c to the other side. Now what we're going to do is we're going to work on this side. And this method is really a combination of factoring and taking the square root method, okay? And you'll see that shortly here. And what we're going to do next is we're going to take half of b, we're going to square it, and then we're going to add it to both sides. And that both sides is important because, as you guys know, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. So we're going to take half of b. b in this case, remember, is 6. So we're going to take half of 6, which is 3. We're going to square it, right? That's what the directions say, square it. So if I square half of 6 is 3. I square it, I get 9. I'm now going to add it to both sides. Okay, so what we end up doing when we do that, when we complete the square, we're creating a perfect square trinomial here. This is a perfect square, this is a perfect square. X times 3 times 2 is 6, so this is a PST. And now this side can be factored, okay? So our next step is we're going to factor the PST. Okay, so when we go to do that, we know PST is factored as a binomial squared. So it's the square root of the first, x, the square root of the last, 3. And the sign combination plus plus, we know there must be a plus there. Negative 4 plus 9 is 5. And we're still kind of cruising here. Maybe some of you notice and you go, ah, that looks familiar. That looks like last night's homework. All right, and that's good stuff. Because what we do have now is we have a binomial squared. Okay, so what we're going to do is now we're going to use the square root method. Use square root method. Okay, these are our steps here that are coming along. All right, so that means since I have a binomial squared, I have a squared term, I could take the square root of both sides. Okay, and we should remember this from last night. On the left-hand side, we get whatever we're taking the square root of. And then we got to remember something that's really important about this next side. Okay, the square root property says if you take the square root of both sides, you always end up with the positive negative root. Okay, so really there's two root 5s here, positive root 5 and a negative root 5. And we're solving for x. I have one more move to make. I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides, so I get negative 3 plus or minus root 5. And that becomes our final answer. We have two answers. We have negative 3 plus root 5 and negative 3 minus root 5. Okay, so I'm going to go through, I'm going to do the rest of these examples because I do think they're a little bit different and I don't want you getting stuck and you need to know how to work through some of these. This is one that works out where you have an integer and a radical and you have two solutions because of the plus minus sign, okay? All right, so here we go. So I'm going to start cruising here. So here's my c value. The first step is to move c to the other side by subtracting it from both sides. So I get x squared minus 10x, I'm going to leave my space, equals negative 8. Now I'm going to take half of b, half of 10, negative 10 is negative 5. I square it, I get 25. I'm going to add that to both sides. So I just created my PST here. This is factorable. It's x minus 5 squared, and that equals 17. And now I'm going to take the square root of both sides. I get x minus 5 equals, don't forget, plus or minus 17. And then I add 5 to both sides. Okay, and I get x equals 5 plus or minus root 17. And I know we haven't gone over adding and subtracting radicals yet. We will. But you can't add, I think I said it in a previous lesson, you can't add a number and a radical. So we're going to leave that as it is. All right, let's keep going because I do think these present little differences as we work our way through. I'm going to move c to the other side. X squared minus 18x equals negative 73. Again, a couple pointers. Just remember to leave that space because now when we create our PST, I have a room to put that third term. Take half of 18, which is 9. I square it, I get 81. Going to add that to both sides. I created my PST, x minus 9 squared, negative 73 plus 81 is 8. Okay, good. So this one's going to create a little bit of a difference. Same idea though. Take the square root of both sides. So on the left side, we get our usual binomial. On the right side, we remember our symbol, but I have root 8. And you always want to put your final answers in simplified radical form. So now we're starting to tie in so much stuff that we've learned in these videos. Okay, we know that this is the same as 8 times 4, so I'm going to pull out a 2. So this becomes 2 root 2. So I just simplified that radical. And now I'm just going to add 9 to both sides. And I have 9 plus or minus 2 root 2. Okay, we're going to do one more because I think this will be kind of interesting as well. Okay, so we'll start the process. And for all the directions that say, hey, complete the square, even if you can factor or use the square root method, I'm asking that you guys try this, okay? Your first 8 on your homework are going to be completing the square. The rest of them will be some of the other methods we talked about. Okay, so now I'm ready to take half of 12, which is 6. I square it, which is 36. I create my PST here of x minus 6 squared. Over here I have 20. Take the square root of both sides. I get x minus 6. And now again, I got to remember that symbol. This is 4 times 5, so it's going to become 2 root 5. and then I add 6 to both sides. Okay, so nothing too crazy. The steps are really important to remember. This is completing the square. It does get a little bit more involved in Algebra 2, but we're going to keep it simple over the virtual classroom. You guys will have a few homework problems. I'll be posting that as well. That'll be due by 11:59 tonight. And then you guys get a nice Memorial Day weekend. I won't be giving you anything to do over the weekend. Rest, enjoy, and then we come back on Monday. We'll get things going, or on Tuesday, we'll get things going again. Actually, I won't see you till Wednesday. All right, so this is Mr. Schwartz signing off. Hope you guys have a good time with completing the square and have a super Memorial Day weekend. Be safe and enjoy this time, okay? Try to. All right, take care.